Welcome to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast, where we dive deep into all things blood flow restriction training. I'm your show host, Johnny Owens, and whether you're a clinician, researcher, or athlete, you've come to the right place. Each episode, we break down the latest research, interview leading experts, and translate complex science into practical applications. We're here to bridge the gap between laboratory findings and real-world implementation. What's up, folks? Welcome back to another Owens Recovery Science Podcast. I'm your host today, Johnny Owens, and I have a guest that I'm super stoked to have on here because he's going to bring not only the knowledge, dude's freaking smart, but also some practical application in athletics of how we can do blood flow restriction. And so his name's Jordan Sabarin. I'll get into his bio in a minute. And so our paths kind of crossed, but not really. We both spoke on blood flow restriction at the NBA health and performance meetings back in March in Chicago. We were in different panels, and thank God he wasn't on my panel because he's a 6'8" former pro basketball player who's a strength coach. So you put muscle on top of that frame. He looks like a freaking superhero. I mean, I don't like to stand next to people that look like that. So I was actually with his team doc with the Detroit Pistons, Bill Mazuros, who's shorter than me. So I felt good with that. So anyways, our guest today is Jordan Sabarin. Like I said earlier, he's a strength conditioning coach with the Detroit Pistons. He's been an S&C coach for 13 years, been with the Pistons, I can't remember, for quite some time now. And he's an expert in blood flow restriction. So not only has he been applying it in the NBA with the team, but then he decided to go get his PhD at Wayne State and get his PhD in blood flow restriction with an actual question that he had, and his dissertation kind of helped answer that question, which I freaking love. It wasn't just a dissertation on how does blood flow restriction affect, something that maybe doesn't really matter. So I think that's what's going to be really impactful today. So I love this last part. It was about Jordan Bridges' research and real-world application, having implemented BFR to help players recover faster, stay strong, and train smarter during the grind of the NBA season. So Jordan, welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a long time since I've been listening to you guys, so it's great to actually talk to you guys in person and on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. So give me your background. Let's go way back. I want to hear about not only kind of where you're from, but your MBA experience, and then what led you into becoming a strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah,
or not MBA experience, but pro experience. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No. Well, just for the record, I'm 6'11". I know you said 6'8".
6'11".
So, you shorted me on a couple inches there.
Damn.
Yeah, no, I guess I should have been a better basketball player, but I mean, I did play for a little bit. Obviously played in college and overseas, and always loved the physical piece of it. Always tried to, take pride in taking care of my body and making sure I was physically ready to perform at the best I could anyway. And so that kind of translated when I was overseas. I kind of explored, what I want to do after basketball, and strength and conditioning, wasn't brand new, but it was newer in the fact that, at Oakland when I played in college, we didn't really have a dedicated strength coach. So I didn't really get to experience that part of it. But, it definitely fit with my passion, especially being in basketball now. It's my two passions of basketball and strength and conditioning. It's been a great thing. I kind of explored that field and figured I'd give it a try. And so after I was done playing, I did some internships, consulted with some mentors, and then that's kind of what led me into doing it as a profession, and was blessed to get the Pistons job a few years after I started, and been here ever since.
Do you see a difference? It seems like a lot of the NBA teams have a European person on staff. in the performance space or strength conditioning space, and maybe more so than we see like in NFL or MLB. So, do you see a difference in S&C philosophies from the U.S. and the European side?
Yeah, I feel absolutely. I feel like there's been, like you said, a influx of foreign practitioners in the NBA, and they've come and gone, and different from different parts in the world. There's a big influence from Australia at one point, and then Europe, like you mentioned. But I feel like it's just our field's grown so much in the last 15 years. Even in my 12 years with the Pistons, it's changed so dramatically. So I feel like it's all been positive, a positive influence, especially when the Australian people started coming in. Obviously, they have a pretty solid framework of strength conditioning and sports science. You started to see the sports science piece really evolve in the NBA, and I feel like that was influenced heavily from Europe and Australia. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think especially on the sports science side, that's where the NBA, I think, started kind of going kind of at the next level, maybe compared to what we're seeing in some of the other leagues and back a while back. Now everyone's kind of almost getting to that same level, I think. What led you to looking at blood flow restriction? Did you see it when you were a player, or is it something you discovered as S&C?
Yeah, no, definitely not as a player. It was when I started with the Pistons, actually. It was probably in 2000. We might have been, I don't want to say late adopters, but we weren't probably early, but it was probably 2016, I think, is when I first started hearing about it. I think a couple of our PTs might have just got certified, and we were just started implementing it with the Pistons. I think about 2016, 17, somewhere around there. We had, Zach come in and train our whole team as far as sports medicine goes, and I think that's where it all really started. So that's where I really first heard about it, and we started using it slowly, and it just gained traction in our department. And a couple of years later, we were using it for everything, as we'll probably get into. But yeah, it's kind of just taken off for us. So
Yeah, for sure. Definitely on the clinical side. So
yeah.
that's where we're loving to see is guys like you on the S&C side, stealing the units from the clinical guys and and messing around
Yeah.
with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
we've definitely had some not battles, but we've been, we're blessed to have so many units with the Pistons right now. I think we have like 10, but we've definitely had some, trying to scavenge for devices, and we try to play nice, but sometimes, it gets a little bit
Yeah.
chaotic at times.
Oh,
So
yeah. At Center for the Intrepid, we were like, "Where's our other unit?" And then it'd be like,
uh,
"Damn OTs!" They taking it upstairs, fight them to get it back from those guys. So, so you're obviously I know that grind, and you're a busy dude, and the travel schedules are crazy, and so you're like, "Yo, let me get a PhD now." So, what drove you to like go down this road?
I know I was thinking about that. Kind of reviewing and preparing for this podcast, and I was just like, man, I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest. I didn't know what I was getting into. We just had our second child right when I started pursuing it, and yeah, I was not too pleased. But I didn't really know what I was getting into. I kind of just it sounded like a good idea, and I talked to a buddy of mine who's a PhD, and he kind of planted a seed as far as like, hey, having a good advisor is probably the most important thing with PhD. And so that, brought me to the advisor that I ended up working under. And it was a lady that we worked with the Pistons that I knew. And so she works in an ex-phys lab we'll start at Oakland and then at Wayne State. And so we had worked with her for a few different testing, VO2 and body comp and sweat testing, and she was great. She was awesome, and I just talked to her, and it just seemed so like the situation was a perfect situation for me. Just working with her. The lab was down the street from the facility. She was great. She was willing to work with me and knowing my schedule, and it's so everything kind of fell into place, even though I was a little naive to like what I was really getting into, working full time and having a family and all that. So, yeah, there was definitely times during it that I was contemplating what I was thinking, but now that it's over with, it's fine. But yeah, it definitely was a difficult 4 years, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
I bet, man. If you had time to think about it, you probably wouldn't have done it. So thank God you just
Oh
kind
yeah,
of jumped in. It's awesome.
yeah, exactly.
So, did you, as you were going through the program, did you already have a question in your mind for your dissertation that you wanted to address, or did you know you wanted to look at blood flow restriction?
No, it kind of gradually came to me. It was something I discussed with my advisor. She was really intrigued by blood flow restriction. She didn't know a whole lot about it. Um, but it wasn't something I knew for sure I wanted to study. It was probably maybe year two that that's kind of the time where I really had to make a decision. And, we had floated different ideas, and obviously we were using blood flow restriction training a lot with the Pistons. And it was something that we kept, learning more about, and really looking at all the physiology really that's involved, and how we looking at the science on how we use it and how to implement it. And yeah, the question came to came to me. It was a natural question that we actually had and that we were trying to figure out with our group. So it kind of worked out well that I was looking for something to study specifically. Blood flow restriction training was on the radar, and it was something that my advisor nudged me to do. And then we had a pretty important question that we had to answer, and so it kind of just all came together, and then I went for it. So
Yeah, so let's get into the question because it definitely fills a gap. This is a question we get a lot. So I'm going to let you kind of set the stage and also like explain, how the MBA works from, if you need to get a lift in, when you guys do it, is it when you're traveling, what do you do? And just kind of give us like the scenario of what you have to.
yeah, so I guess we the ideal window, at least it was a few years ago when I was thinking about this question, or when we were thinking about this question, was the ideal flow of the day is these players arrive, have breakfast, do their treatment with the medical team, and then they ideally come to us in the weight room. We get them prepared for the day, movement wise. Um, ideally, ideally to them, they get all their work done so that after that they can go to practice their recovery, and they're out. That's the ideal setup for them, I think, so that their day is not drawn out any longer. But so that was kind of like the traditional way of doing it for many years. We started asking questions, just a lot of times from the player's perspective too. You started, depending on what you're doing with them, you started hearing them talk about fatigue, or hey, I want to be ready for practice. And it depends on who it is too, right? Some of the younger guys that are maybe on the fringe, that are trying to make the team, or trying to practice is their game, essentially, that they want to be fresh enough to perform at their best, right? So we started exploring a little bit the literature on what fatigue looks like after a traditional resistance training session, right? So we started questioning that whole flow of getting their lift in before practice. And then we started implementing BFR, and as you know, Johnny, maybe some of the people listening, like, BFR doesn't feel great. And after, if you do it right, there's going to be a fatigue. There's going to be a feeling of fatigue. It's going to, different people respond to it differently, but it doesn't feel great initially. Obviously, as time goes on, you recover quickly, and we'll get into that part of it, I'm sure. But, we started questioning BFR before practice as well. And so we started looking at the research, and long story short, I don't, there was some evidence to support the fact that, there's going to be some residual fatigue from BFR. But I wasn't completely satisfied with that research and how applicable it is to elite athletes in our setting, right? Our setting's fairly unique. The research, there is just not a lot of research on elite athlete populations. So, that's ultimately what spurred me to study this, is to really try to answer it in how it applies to our setting and our population. And yeah, that kind of set the stage.
Yeah, yeah. And we always just kind of leaned on, I'm sure the study, and Jeremy Linecky as well, our buddy. But he did like 2013. Just when does your MVC come back after a BFR session? And basically, at an hour, it looked like it was back. But then, what's between that hour? And that was a lot of the teams were using it for this analgesic benefit. Nagging injuries during the playoffs, and when you do BFR, you can get some analgesia. But they're like, if we do it 30 minutes before the game, are they screwed? So we didn't. We all we had is like around an hour. They should be fine. We're like, well, that's kind of not our window. I'll let you move into then kind of the hypothesis here and what your dissertation study is all about.
Yeah, no, exactly. That window's dealing with elite basketball athletes. There's that window's tight, right? It's not, you don't have a lot of time. So that 30-minute window is a sweet spot. I feel like if you can get it in that window, then you're good. But anything more than that, I think guys start getting impatient and they're pulled in different directions. So yeah, I mean, the purpose of this study was just to assess global physical performance measurements, and assess to see how those change after a BFR, and control it. And we use a control to see how that compares to a traditional resistance training of the same exercises. And we just wanted to see if that would recover within that 30-minute window. And then with that thought, if it did recover, we'd feel better about doing a BFR workout, or a lower body workout before practice. And we wanted to test the traditional part of it. We wanted to test the same exercises, but a little higher intensity. Now, it's not work matched, obviously. That would have, you see a lot of the research work matched. We kind of know what that looks like, when you're when it's a work match condition. It's, light loads, no BFR. It's not going to have the same effect. So we want to look at kind of what we would actually do in a typical workout traditionally before practice as well, and see how they compared, and see what that looked like from a fatigue standpoint. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what the details of that study are.
Can you go through we get a lot of really hardcore BFR listeners, so let's get into the details of what your exercises were, your set rep scheme, LOP. I'm sure you guys probably use the Delphi PTS, just so everyone kind of understands where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we tried to just, stick to the evidence as much as we could for everything. We were lucky to have the Delphi units. We love how it's auto-regulated. The LOP is, we're pretty confident that it's super accurate. We use typical 30, 15, 15, 15 sets and reps. So the exercise selection was a single leg press, a single leg calf, and a single leg extension exercise. So those are the 3 exercises. 4 sets of all those, with your typical 30 seconds in between reps, in between sets, 1 minute in between exercises. So fairly standard from the guidelines that I think are more common out there. But we used 80% of LOP for our training sets. And then obviously our training intensity is somewhat unique. We use the Omni-Res scale instead of their one rep max testing. So we did that because in our setting we wanted to make it as efficient as possible. We don't normally do the one rep max testing very often, even though we probably should. It's just from a convenience standpoint and logistically, it just doesn't work out great in a chaotic setting when there's multiple athletes. So we just felt like this would be the most efficient method, and it obviously has evidence to support it. So we decided to go with that method, and it's somewhat unique in the literature. There's not a lot of, especially in the acute fatigue literature, there's not a lot of people that used Omni-Res. So
Yeah, can you,
um,
if anyone's taken our certification, they know the Omni-Res because clinically it's beautiful because we can't get 1RMs, post-surgical. So, it's something that we used a lot at the Center for the Intrepid, and I think it's great for us. But can you go into what the Omni-Res is?
yeah, absolutely. So it's basically like I hope I'm not don't make anybody mad by this, but it's essentially like it's similar to an RPE scale with a diagram on it. The diagram has somebody in our case lifting a weight, and it's an exertion scale, so it shows somebody that's doesn't look like they're exerting very very much for the weight, and that's around, I think, 0 or 1. It's a 10 point scale, I believe. And yeah, 10 is somebody that's really trying to lift a barbell over their head and they're really having a hard time. So that's the scale. It has diagrams corresponding to, I don't think it's every number, but
Yeah, I think
I
it's every
forget what
two typically. Yeah.
yeah, every two. And so you ask the question, after doing a set, you ask the question, how does it feel based on the diagram? Would it, 1 or 0 being it's super easy, you could do it all day, and 10 being the hardest thing you ever did, and get their feedback on that, and then adjust the weight based on what their feedback.
Yeah, and so if you want to hit a 70% 1RM, you would tell them kind of you want to be around this 7 on that RP, 7, 8-ish, right? And then for BFR, we typically say we want you to be around that 2 to 3, kind of semi-smiley face
Exactly.
on the scale. So, but it seems so. You tell people, they're like, there's no way that works. But the validity compared to true 1RMs is actually pretty good. So people have a pretty good idea of what their RP 1RMs are. So yeah, I thought that was awesome you used that. It kind of helped with some of our stuff.
Yeah, I give you guys credit too. I mean, I got the idea from listening to the podcast, and yeah, I honestly think that it just my observations of how it went. I thought it went pretty well. Like I feel like it was pretty close to what I would anticipate certain guys' 1RMs to be.
Yeah, and as an S&C coach, you see it all the time. So you probably have a good feel just from effort.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so for traditional, you chose what, 7 and 8. So kind of like a
correct.
70% ish 1RM, BFR 2 to 3, 20, 30%,
Yep.
I guess. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. All right. And that's a three of those leg exercises with BFR is pretty tough.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you switch. Yeah, you went from unilateral and then switched and did the other side. So you hit both legs, obviously. You weren't having
Yeah.
one leg just serve as a non-condition
No.
control. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But now you guys need Gen 3s. They're bilateral. So it would have made your study
Yes.
easier.
That would have been great.
Although when we get into the subjective stuff you had in your dissertation, these guys might not have even let you do bilateral, because that's one of my favorite parts of your dissertation is the players' comments. And then I don't want to not stress enough, this is with NBA players, which is huge, because that we just do not get that with pro athletes. So your relationship there definitely helped as well, I'm sure. So
Yeah. No. It was. I guess, like, bigger picture thing. I tried to when I was creating the study design, I was trying to also consider the setting and the environment and the players. And I was trying to make it as, not I don't as efficient as possible, as in normal to them as possible, right? I didn't want to get, it's not a lab, right? So I couldn't have a laboratory setting or try to make it a laboratory setting. That's just not going to work. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, cool, we'll do whatever you want for your dissertation study. Like, no, that's not how it works. Obviously, we wanted to answer the question with this population for these guys, so we tried to mimic it and set it up so that it's almost as similar as their daily routines it would be, right? So even the lift, that's not something that they have never done before. Counter movement jumps on the force plates. I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but that's how we tested.
Yeah, we need to get into your objective measures.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something they've done frequently, So as much as I try to make it as normal of a day to them as it still wasn't perfect. Obviously, there's multiple athletes at the same time. It was off season, so we actually had to get work in, right? It's not like I could do a work match control of them doing, the same exercise without blood flow restriction at a 2 to 3% intensity. They would have got nothing out of it. That's not something we would ever do, right? So there's a lot of things that you try to plan for, you try to control, and it's not great. You try to control as much variable as you can, and it's not gonna be perfect. So yeah, it was challenging, but I feel like, and as we know, the sample size wasn't everybody, so there was some challenges with that as well. But
sure, I'm sure. We'll get into your objective measures of what y'all were looking at, or you were looking at.
Yeah, so we tried to. So we use, I guess, so setting it up as far as like the intervals of testing, we used a counter movement jump as the measure of fatigue. A lot of the research has isometric or isokinetic single joint leg extension testing. That's very common in the literature. I wanted to be a little different and kind of give us more answers as far as, okay, what does that look like globally? Because they're basketball players, they're going to be on the court doing basketball things, jumping, running, all this stuff, right? So I wanted to see if there's a test. Obviously, we use a counter movement jump frequently for a specific reason. Obviously, that gives us a better idea of, overall performance measures. And so I wanted to kind of continue with that and look at the overall impact of fatigue after both these conditions. So, we didn't have a good setup for isometric single joint testing at the time. We didn't have a isokinetic. We do now, but we have a HUMAC. We didn't have that before. So and I knew it would be somewhat efficient and convenient for them because we have force plates right in our weight room, and it's like right next to the machine. So, many factors into that, but so how we looked at it was after 5 minutes of both conditions, so BFR and traditional, after 5 minutes we jumped them 3 jumps. They rested or did free throws and light core activities if they couldn't sit still. And then we did a 15-minute interval. And then the last interval was, so we did baseline to begin with, before, rested, stayed after a warm up. They did the condition after 5 minutes of the condition, after they were done the third exercise, they did 3 jumps. Then after 15, and then after 30. So that was the 4 jumps, 4 jump intervals that we did. And it was funny because I had planned on just doing free throws in between, because I knew that they, sitting down in a weight room after doing work for, let's call it 30 minutes, it doesn't work well for basketball players. So then I was like, okay, cool, let's do free throws. We're gonna go on the court and shoot free throws. All right, keep them somewhat occupied, nothing that'll affect fatigue, whatever. And then sure enough, I don't know if you've ever been. Yeah, the coaches see them, right? And so anytime coaches see basketball players on the court, they come running out, right? And they want to
Oh
do
man.
stuff. And so at one point there was one of the guys the coaches were trying to do a workout with the guy while he's
Resting.
resting in after his after his exercises, and I'm trying to get jumps in between. And so after that, I was like, okay, we we're not going on the court unless I know for sure there's no coaches around.
Here's your cell phone. Just
Yeah,
play
yes,
with that.
exactly, a
Yeah.
1000%. I think I
Yeah.
actually did that. No, I
Yeah.
was like, you bring your phone or whatever. Yeah, that's it's so true. So, like I said, it wasn't a perfect plan, but yeah, that's that's what.
When you do, when you hear counter movement jump, I mean, a lot of people are just like, okay, so you're just measuring jump height, but you get a lot more out of that. And I will say we've used that before in studies where your numbers were way higher than we would ever. Like this is the best counter movement jumps in the history of
I didn't
any
even think
study
about
ever done.
that. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like
Uh,
triple what I have
yeah.
in any of ours. So, but
No,
can you go
that's a
through
good
kind of
point, though. Yeah,
what all you
sorry.
get? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. Obviously, we were looking at multiple metrics from the force plates. Um, how we kind of broke it up is we kind of broke it up, and we had 14 metrics we were looking at. There's a group at OKC. I forget the author's name. Maybe Mercer. Anyways, we we got we their paper described multiple metrics that looked at fatigue in basketball players from force plates. And so we kind of use that evidence to support our movement strategy or fatigue related metrics. And many of them were eccentric based metrics. We also wanted some output based metrics, like you said, jump height, peak power, concentric velocity. Um, I forget, there's a couple other ones. But we want to kind of look at both output and movement strategy or fatigue. And so, um, yeah, so that was kind of our or my thought on how to capture as much. I mean, there's literally 200 metrics we could have looked at, right? So
Yeah,
it's like, how
for
do you
sure.
narrow it down, and then, what makes the most sense? I wanted to
What
have
matters?
and what matters, right?
Yeah,
And so that was the motivation for those metrics.
cool. And then you also followed this with qualitative and or some
Yeah.
subjective, and so which I love. I mean, that's if you do a clinical trial, it's like you better have a subjective along with it as well, and so that's important to understand. And actually, it's the funny part about your paper. Um,
Yeah.
most dissertations aren't funny, and most dissertations don't drop f bombs, but we'll get into that.
I know. It was actually pretty good because when I was doing my dissertation defense, I was pretty monotone. I was nervous, obviously, and I'm going through like the boring, like half the people looked like they were falling asleep, and then I threw the observations up on the board, and like I changed it for my actual dissertation, but my presentation, I didn't like bleep it out or anything. It was like straight F words. There's multiple F words going on, and then so everybody got a good laugh. So I kind of woke everybody up. So that was a positive for sure. But I
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got it.
yeah, I know. So I guess the history of the qualitative part was I really didn't want to do it because I mean I'm obviously sports science. There's not a lot of qualitative. I honestly didn't even know how to describe qualitative data. I was very quantitative. Most of the stuff I read in our field is quantitative. Even my advisor was very, biased towards quantitative data. So how it happened was for in my dissertation committee, one of my committee members was more of a qualitative researcher. And I didn't really, I mean, I kind of realized that, but when I invited her to be part of the committee, we started talking after she accepted it, and she's like, well, this is great stuff, but I'm more of a qualitative researcher. what are your thoughts on doing that? I was like, no, that sounds like a, bigger challenge than I want to take on. This is already a big enough challenge, but I didn't say no, but I was just hesitant. And so anyways, I decided to do it. Obviously part of the motivation was just I guess, the job I have and my relationship with these players, that it not only would it be interesting data just from their takes after doing BFR and traditional, but it was just the uniqueness of my relationship with them, and you know, and how the conversations on a normal daily basis happen. Um, in this case, it wasn't, and I mentioned this in my dissertation. It wasn't super formal interview style. Like
Mhm.
I was doing observations, and it was a semi formal interview. Is how we ended up doing it, but it was more conversational. I don't think they would have answered well if I was, super, dialed in with the
Yeah.
interview
Well,
process and,
lab
locked them
code
in.
and yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So, but
Well, it
I
makes it
thought the
much
data
more
was
real
great.
world. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No, that it adds, and we'll get into that. But basically, yeah. So you kind of queried them of what they thought of both conditions, and took some observations while they were doing it, as well. So we'll get into that here in a sec. And so obviously they're used to traditional lifts, so they've already kind of been trained in that game. But were these BFR users at all?
yeah, yeah. At that point, I think yeah, well, I know every one of those athletes had used BFR to some extent. Now, some used it more than others,
Mhm.
for sure, but it wasn't like we needed to introduce them to BFR. They had all been exposed to it, I think, which helped for
Yeah,
sure. They
that's
knew
good.
what they were getting into. So that was huge.
Their cortisol went up as soon as they heard the machine turn on.
Yeah, and a little beep at the beginning.
Yeah, one athlete told me he has nightmares every time he hears that doo 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 like in the
Yeah,
middle of
yeah.
the night. All
It's
right, man.
funny
Well,
because we would always, like, as practitioners, we would always get super excited. We would like push that button and hear that, the doo doo doo, and we would all be like, "Yeah, let's go."
I I know.
The players have a different reaction to it.
Yeah, pissed.
Yeah,
Well, let's get into the data, man.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, it was interesting. So from a quantitative perspective, the data was interesting. It actually, overall, the BFR condition
Well,
did
wait, let me
not
stop you real quick. What was your
yeah.
hypothesis going in?
Oh, that there would be fatigue that lingered past 30 minutes. We anticipated that there would be residual fatigue past that 30 minutes. Um, yeah, so yeah, good. That's a good question, because that's not what we found. Obviously, we found, I think it was three metrics that showed significant showed a significant difference from the first jump baseline before any condition to the second, which is 5 minutes post. This is in the BFR condition. Um, there was, that's kind of anticipated. I would expect. I actually expected more metrics to show fatigue in those first 5 minutes past after blood flow restriction training. I think so. There's, I think, three metrics that showed significance then,
Yeah, it was
but at
jump height, concentric peak velocity, and then their jump strategies. Their
yeah,
depth didn't go.
depth. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so that was after the 5 minutes, but after 30 minutes, there was nothing that was significant. And even from a practical standpoint, I think it was like 7.5% was the most
Yeah.
that we
It was
saw.
modest,
And
very modest. Yeah.
yeah, so I was surprised by that, to be honest. And even in the traditional condition, going into that, it's very similar actually. I think the metrics were slightly different. I think peak power, height, and concentric velocity, maybe.
No, it's just two: jump height and peak
Two.
power. Yeah,
Okay, yes,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, so two output variables. No movement strategy in the traditional training condition, and they had recovered by the last jump at 30 minutes post. I'm a little surprised on that one as well, especially at a 7-8 on a Omni-Res scale.
You kind of answered two questions here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and and another thing too, we might have mentioned this already, but like I know you hinted at it, is this is a 3 exercise protocol, whereas
Six
most
in
recent.
total. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
if you, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
right. And so, most of the research is one exercise, single leg extensions, and so, but then again, I mentioned this at the end of my dissertation, is like, we're dealing with elite athletes, and their ability to recover, is elite as well, right? And especially in the NBA, where like there's just not, there's not a lot of recovery. So I think, physiologically, their bodies are efficient at recovery, and
That's where this is huge, though. If I took some healthies at a college and had them do basically 6 BFR exercises, kind of crush their quads and calves, or 75% 1RM lifts, I think we'd see different results probably. And then I'm telling everyone, man, it's going to be a couple hours at least until you can maybe come back. So having it in this elite population, I think also is so cool about this study.
yeah,
They
no,
just recover.
yeah, I guess, yeah. I'm still surprised, to be honest. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to really explain it, but other than that, maybe the traditional resistance training condition could have been, some of the research I was looking at, and I explained in my dissertation as well, like they're doing 10 sets of squats and all this. And yeah, of course they're going to have residual
Yeah.
fatigue from that. It's not
Yeah.
anything we would do. But maybe they're used to doing this type of lift, and they recovered well. They're elite athletes. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, let's get into your qualitative.
love it. Yeah, the observations. Yeah, the observations were great. A lot of F words, like we mentioned. A lot of another word I mentioned in my dissertation is agony. It looked like they were in a lot of agony, as you know,
Yeah.
right? Even when I do it, I look like I'm in agony too. It's if you do it the right way with the protocol that we use, that's 80% LOP and at an intensity, 20 to 30% 1 RM, you're gonna feel it, and it's not gonna be fun, and
Right.
it's gonna be uncomfortable, and that's the observations I found for sure. Now, going to the interview, it was mixed as far as, well, the questions were, so the questions, I was 4 questions. It basically, was there a difference physically between the BFR and the traditional resistance training condition? And then, hopefully they would explain. And then, how did either of those conditions affect their subsequent performance on the basketball court? Now, that was the goal, was for them to go do practice after. Okay. Now, that didn't work out perfect either, because some of the testing was in the off season, so there wasn't a lot of court exposure at that time. The third question was, did they differ in discomfort, fatigue, or effort between blood flow restriction training and traditional resistance training? Was there a difference there? And which one do you prefer, and why? And so the first 2 questions, as far as like, was there a difference? There was kind of mixed. Um, some people thought that blood flow restriction training was, made them feel different. Some was traditional. So it was mixed there. The other one, I wouldn't say it was a great data point as far as like, how did they feel going into the court? It was mixed as well, but like the court exposure was not how I drew it up, essentially, is like going into practice. The third one, definitely not surprising, but the blood flow restriction training condition, definitely the players had more discomfort and thought that it took more effort. Now, I would say somewhat surprising, maybe not, but like the fatigue part of that question, more said the traditional resistance training caused more fatigue. I would probably have said that they would all said BFR for all of
BFR.
them.
Yeah.
But and then the last question, which one do you prefer? Um, it was interesting. Anecdotally, and just working with the athletes and having them exposed to blood flow restriction training, I actually, as much as it sucks, um, I would actually, just working with them, I would actually thought that they would have preferred blood flow restriction training just because, I feel like at that time we were using it a lot. Guys were being exposed to it. They seemed to sometimes even ask for it or prefer it in certain situations if we gave them a choice, maybe because they knew the benefits of it. But most of the athletes in this case said they prefer traditional. Um, so
Well,
yeah,
one of them did say fuck BFR. So
that's true.
I get it. Well, yeah, and sometimes we always are going to take the path of least resistance, or the devil that is the one you're more comfortable with. So, in the military, it was part of, where we didn't use the recovery word a lot. We use the word resilience, and anything we can do to build resilience. And if you can get through that and deal with all that lactate, you're maybe in the overtime in a game or something like that. You're able to handle something a little bit differently because you've been there. So always like to push that angle when you're
Yeah,
trying to get out of it.
I've used
Uh,
that for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I think we covered pretty much the majority on that. You touched on, these are elite athletes. Anything in the study that obviously sample size is small, but any other things that you pointed out of, maybe this is what we should look at in the future, or this was the problem with this?
Yeah, a couple things that if I had an ideal situation or maybe even a lab situation, I would have a work match control. I would maybe extend the window past 30. I'd maybe try to go within that 1 hour window or even more if I could. And then having an ISO, like we have a HUMAC isokinetic machine, having that data would have been pretty cool to compare with as well. Um, I just don't think you could do it in our setting in the situation that we were in, because obviously the isokinetic testing piece isn't the most efficient process. Um, but that would have been great if we could have done those three
That's
things.
your next study. Go get those
Yeah.
Wayne State basketball players.
Yes, exactly. There you go. For sure. For sure.
Okay, so again, answered awesome questions. If you want to ask us how close to a game, if I'm doing analgesia, or how close to practice, has this convinced you that you're okay doing BFR within that 30-minute window?
I think it's convinced me that we could do those three exercises.
What a scientist.
Oh yeah, correct answer. But you know, it makes us feel better. How about that? It makes us
Yeah,
feel better. It definitely makes us feel better as far as what, because going into it and after looking at Dr. Lenneke's paper and consulting with you guys as well, we were unsure. Obviously the fact that there is evidence that it does, Dr. Lenneke pointed out there is fatigue, and from a local level, it's somewhat concerning. But I feel like in order for me to feel absolutely confident, I would need a bigger sample size. I
sure.
feel like,
Yeah.
right? I don't think we talked about that directly, but we had 11 people that did the study. Three of those 11 did not complete both conditions, so they did not do the traditional leg of the study. So we had eight sample size of 8 for the traditional and 11 for the blood flow restriction training condition. I would have liked to seen 15 plus. Obviously, that wasn't possible at the time, but that would have definitely helped support, or give me a better conclusion on the results of the study.
Let's go after that MBA grant, man.
Yeah, I know.
Haven't we studied tendons enough? Well, now it's going to all be clots and Achilles tendons.
Yeah, true.
The number one question I
That's
get nowadays.
man, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, let's transition then to, from this study, like you can just, okay, I can't do a traditional lift because I've got knee OA or I've got this nagging kind of tendinopathy. So, okay, this answer, you could probably do BFR and we feel relatively safe, but let's start moving into how you're applying this in the MBA, blood flow
Yeah.
restriction.
So, um, we've used it in literally every way possible, probably. I feel like because of the grind of the NBA, excuse me, the grind of the NBA, the schedule, the travel, I feel like one of the main ways you could use it is recovery, right? I think that's a huge component to it. We're always looking for ways to recover, or our athletes to recover. There's not a lot of time in between games. Sometimes only a day. Sometimes there's back-to-backs, right? So it's if we can expedite that recovery process in any way possible, that's a huge bonus. And so I think recovery, obviously, it has the science to support that. We've used it for sure many times for that purpose. So I think that's a huge one.
Are
Another one.
you talking IPC or recovery with BFR and exercise?
I'm talking. Sorry, IPC, so
Yeah.
passive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can use it for both. I mean, but
Yeah. I know.
NBA,
Yeah.
NBA
Give
players
me
like,
that cell phone again, baby, and I
yes,
just want to lay here.
give me that exactly. Give me that table on my phone, and I'll do IPC for 30 minutes, no problem, right?
I'm just
Especially, I
happy
mean, I
we've
get
got
it.
them. I'm getting more and more where the athletes are asking for IPC versus Normatec. So it's like, okay,
Yeah,
maybe they're really starting to see the benefit now because Normatec's the
sure.
easiest of them all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no. Subjectively, I haven't had anybody complain about doing that.
Yeah.
The IPC, nobody. I
Yeah.
mean, it's 100% occlusion, for 5 minutes and 5 minutes reperfusion, and I haven't heard one person complain. So
My
that's
wife,
huge.
my wife complained. I tried it on her once, and she said, "Take it
My
off."
wife would, my wife would do the same thing.
Yeah.
I could just hear her complaining for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, these guys have been good about that. So we try to obviously have that as an option, right? I mean, there's multiple recovery options, but that's a big one. The next one I feel like, and you hinted at it, is just the IPC part of it for a priming
Hmm.
pre-competition.
Hmm.
I feel like that's getting a lot of traction recently. And it just makes sense. And again, it's passive. There's
Yeah.
no physical
Not a
cost to it.
fatigue or anything. Yeah.
No, nothing,
Yeah.
right? And it's something that can be done before game. And we're talking elite sport athletes. If we're talking about a 1% immediate increase,
Change.
like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
huge, right?
Yeah.
Like in professional athletes and in professional basketball. I
Yeah.
mean,
Like that
there's
study I
recent,
said, I mean, the
yeah,
jump and track athletes who did it prior, you look at it and
yeah,
you're like, 3%, but you're like, dude, that might medal you in an elite
exactly.
athlete. Those 1% to 3% changes are huge.
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you didn't have to work for it. You literally just put the cuffs on and sat there for 30 minutes. And there's some other research that I've seen it increases sprint speed and change direction speed and vertical jump. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basketball. What are we talking about right now?
I
Like
know.
that's
I know.
basketball athletes. So why wouldn't you
Yeah.
use it, right? So,
Yeah, we know
uh,
and that's the thing. Everyone's like mechanism, 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 and we're still trying to figure all that out. But I mean, I'm 100% convinced now there is a vasodilation effect, and so that alone, if you're going to tell your basketball players you want more blood everywhere prior to your game, then you just lay here and do this and see what happens.
yeah. So we've used it we've used it for that purpose. I wouldn't. I mean, I would love to say that we have 15 guys doing it every game, but we don't.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not how it works. But there's definitely been some guys that have really, adopted it, and it's part of their routine, and they see the benefits, feel the benefits, and so that's been a good one. But going back to your comment earlier, tendon. right? Tendon stuff.
Hmm.
That's a lot of what everybody's talking about tendons in the NBA now. And, I think there's two major benefits of BFR for tendons, right? You get morphological changes, and you get pain reduction, the analgesic effect, like you mentioned. So, I mean, I was reviewing the paper by Centner the other day, and it's like I think they found I think I don't forget it was 8 or 14 week study, but they found 36% increase in stiffness.
I know.
I wouldn't have predicted stiffness being a change that you would see in tendons after BFR. I mean, it makes sense now that I kind of, read the paper and looked into it a little bit, but
Yeah, and Chris has
36%,
shown that's Achilles and patella, so
yes, yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I
then
think,
obviously,
man, I was getting a lot of poo-poo about BFR. People are just like, load, load, load. It's got to be load." It's the same thing with like bone. We're like, there's mechanisms here,
mhm,
and now we're starting to see some of the bone stuff change as well. But yeah, I think tendon there actually is some mechanistic rationale, and at least in the early phases when they're hurting and load just isn't something that a lot of these people want to do when they have these tendinopathies. You get this
yeah,
analgesic benefit and you get the morphologic changes, not only at the tendon, but at the muscle. I mean, that's like,
yeah,
yeah, 1-2 punch and it's
exactly.
kind of all three.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
So we
Unfortunately
we
now
use it a
we're doing
lot
a
for
lot of tendon post-op Achilles repairs in the NBA, but uh, yeah,
well, there's a couple papers that specifically look at that too, and the benefits of it and they found major changes in the bone. Um, you know, in Achilles, I think it was an Achilles rupture, the paper I was glanced over yesterday, but
yeah, it's by
so
Brad Lambert's. Yeah,
yeah,
we presented together this year on it, and it's almost done. He just did kind of, I think, pretty much close to the final analysis of AOSSM, and yeah, preserve muscle. He wasn't looking directly at tendon, but preserve the muscle and also the bone was preserved as well, which mimicked his ACL study. So
that's
basically, everything he
huge.
saw in his ACL study, they saw with the Achilles.
That's remarkable. That's huge. So, but yeah, I mean, the tendon piece, yeah, going back to the tendon piece, the analgesic effect is huge. I mean, if we, like you said, if we can just, reduce some of the pain and discomfort, going into practice or even before a lift, if we can just help them out a little bit so they're not thinking about it, or, they can actually load it a little bit. That's, we get what, so this thing, it's a 45-minute window that is in the research that you presumably get uh, to reduce that discomfort and pain. So we take advantage of that for sure. I think we had a guy that was missing a lot of practices and games because of his knees, his patella tendons, and so we use it. We really try to we were looking for any way to help this guy out. Like anyway, and so we use BFR a lot with him. You know, it's been a game changer as well.
Sweet. How about as an S&C coach? Are you working it into lifts at all, or more with more of the injured guys that need to lift?
BFR in general.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I was telling you this last month, but we've had post-game lists where we've had every device working in the weight room, like at the same time. Like it's chaotic, it's crazy. There's cords everywhere. There's hoses and all that stuff. But we definitely. Obviously, I'm a meathead, so I like the muscle benefits of it for sure. The hypertrophy and strength benefits of it, especially like it just makes sense in the NBA. I mean, like you said, I've had this discussion with multiple strength coaches in the NBA, and it's, well, we need to load, we need to load, we need to load. Like, okay, yeah, I get it. I mean, there's this doesn't replace external loading necessarily, right? It replaces it when you're like, should I do external loading, after a game when we have a game the next day, or even in 2 days, we've had 5 games in 7 nights or whatever, right? Like it just, there's definitely a case to use this when maybe you can get an extra session in that can address those muscular benefits without having to, cause more fatigue or stress them more mechanically or
Yeah,
whatever it is, right?
extra
So
volume without the downside. Pretty much all
exactly.
anabolism, almost no catabolism, and then the joint stress, tendon stress, everything else just really isn't
Right. And
there.
then
And
you can even throw in the active recovery in that session, like that's part of it too, right? If it's a post game lift with BFR, you're adding, an active session, but it's going to help with recovery. It's going to address the muscular benefits. So, yeah, I love it for that, for sure. We don't use it for everybody all the time, but there's definitely a place for it.
we get a lot of questions from strength coaches of how would you work this into a traditional lift? Would you maybe look at doing BFR as a finisher? You don't want to take your guys to a fatigue or failure in the rack, but maybe they could, kind of do a 7, 8 out of 10 on Omni and then get over in the leg press with BFR and just smoke it and get everything out of the muscle. Have you ever done that? Or also maybe I'm going to work it in where there's a lift day, a heavy day, a BFR day. So we get a lot of these questions.
Yeah, we've used it everything you just said. We've used it as a finisher for some guys. Um, we've used it alternating days. We've used it every way. We in some post game lists you have like 10 minutes to work with a guy, so you're just doing BFR sometimes. In every way possible, like you just mentioned, we've used it, and I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but there's definitely a place for either of those situations. For guys that just need extra stimuli to a certain part of their body, maybe it's an extra quad. We'll do a leg extension under BFR at the end of their workout after they, did their rear foot elevated and squats and whatever else, right? And we'll throw, as a finisher. If it's more like, I feel like in more of a rehab situation where maybe it's later in the rehab phases, we'll add like more alternating days, like not necessarily a recovery day using active BFR, but just so we're not doing BFR the whole time, and we don't want to transition completely out of using BFR and just go traditional. We want to kind of keep both going and progress the external loading. I think that's a good time to do the alternating days.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you guys travel with them?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I think we travel with 8. We have like our meathead case with 4 devices and the medical with 4 devices. So,
Nice. Doing your IPC on the plane.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And there's even, I was reading a paper the other day. I think it came out last week. It's the Central Florida guys just almost like a pre-priming with BFR. And that could be, isometrics. And they saw, you kind of ramp up and get all these fast twitch fibers to start to fire almost more than when they were doing like max isometrics. And that could be, just kind of pre-priming the muscle for a lift. And so that could be an interesting case, just starting doing these little isometrics with it on and then go in and do some lifts or even play a game. And that's kind
Yeah,
of, we're doing some baseball throwing stuff right now, which has been really interesting and seeing some changes in what the pitcher's mechanics and velocities are like with this.
I was actually gonna ask you that question. I know there's a fairly recent paper. I think it was soccer specific. I don't know how they did it, but they had BFR go on during practice, and it found some pretty interesting benefits. I think there's some aerobics, some anaerobics, change of direction changes. Obviously, there's the convenience of that,
Yeah,
being a
yeah.
major issue, especially in pro basketball. But just wondering your thoughts. Used it for us. In the past we've used it in a rehab situation. Well, I don't know. We had a pouch and you put the devices in the back.
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah.
you've seen that. I don't know if that, yeah. Anyway, we tried that with a guy. Yeah, I think he was a fifth Met guy and he was getting close to coming back. So we had him doing like dribbling drills and running drills and with the devices hooked up. Anyway, that's the most sports specific we use. We haven't used it a whole lot, but I was just wondering your thoughts on you think that's something that's going to gain more traction or if it's just not very practical.
Yeah, you asked me a couple years ago, I'd say no. And it was just we were just like this is not its place, it's just very low load and specific and um but I think there is potential there, and with the baseball stuff, we're still collecting data down at Point Loma, but they are throwing with it, and almost every subject they've gone through 2 rounds now of testing. They're collegiate pitchers. The one thing we get for sure is the players are, after they get done, are like, my arm feels alive. It feels amazing. I mean, it's like the reverse of your qualitative. It is like everyone is like, this is wow, my arm feels great. We know that we use lower LOP, so it's 50%, so it's not as bad up there. But I mean, it was supposed to be kind of more of warm up throws, and then when I start seeing the videos what they're doing, I'm like, Jesus. And maybe that's their warm ups, but it is a full on, like, they're whipping it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then when they're looking at some of their biomechanics and also velocity, speed of the ball and things, it's after they do it, it's better. It looks like. I mean, small samples right now, so there is that. And then our question is, okay, maybe with quarterbacks and golfer or something like that, is there some sort of pre-priming that's going on, or something else? But just feeling like your arm's alive as a baseball pitcher is big enough right there. So there could be potential.
Yeah,
There's
that's
always
great.
that. I always worry sometimes just the biomechanics. It's, as you're fatiguing and you're losing oxygen, you got a guy who's maybe a little injured dribbling a ball. Does everything fall apart? And it's like, how'd you tear your MCL again? All these guys
Yeah.
have these cuffs on me. And there was a study at University of Washington where they had post-op ACLs. They were far out from surgery, but they had them just do step-up exercises where they're without BFR, and their biomechanics changed when they were doing, had more hip internal rotation. They were fatiguing. As the quad fatigues, things start to change. So that's my biggest concern. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. I don't know. I mean, the baseball thing, I'd be interesting to see what comes from that for sure. That's yeah, because you know how dialed in they are about every small
Oh,
increment in mechanics. I could see that being a thing, but no, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your next direction with everything? Just keep figuring out more ways to apply it. Do you have ideas for the upcoming season of anything you're going to be implementing differently or more with BFR?
No, I don't know. I think just keep exploring. I think that's what, obviously there's a lot of new research that comes out, and just keep exploring ways to use it. I mean, there's so many ways to use it. It's almost crazy to think how many different ways that BFR can benefit athletes. Like and literally you could have them on BFR all day, like for different,
You peel the onion.
things, right? Like
Yeah.
conditioning, recovery, muscular, tendon, just like there's so many things, right? So
Cardiovascular.
yeah. So um, the sky's the limit as far as that goes. But you obviously you can't have these guys strapped to a BFR device all day long. So you got to pick your battles, and a lot of it's like educating the athlete and seeing what works for them. You know what I mean? I would like to get into the IPC more. I'd like to kind of explore that a little bit more. We've had guys use it, but I'd like to see a little bit more guys use it. I'd like to maybe explore the cardiovascular piece a little bit more, even post game, what that looks like from a recovery standpoint,
We're seeing that a
or
lot. Yeah.
yeah, extra cardio plus recovery, maybe even some muscular benefits. We've seen that in some of the research with the cardio and BFR piece. So, there's definitely some areas that, I think we could do a better job of and explore. So looking forward to that part.
Great, man. Well,
I would like to do. I would like to, and I almost wish I would have done it. Was an IPC study? I think that would have been a lot easier.
yes, so easy.
Even
I just want to do IPC.
yeah, just have them on the table, do an IPC. Get them to jump on the kind of movement jumps at on the force plates after, and then see what that looks like. In basketball athletes, but maybe that's
Yeah,
my
like that
next
study I
study.
sent yesterday. I mean, they showed some changes, but they did one one 5-minute inflation. Like,
Yeah. I
like
forgot about
just,
that. That's
just do what is normal. And then maybe
right.
the next study, you're like, well, let's try it with 2 or with 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy. I forgot about that part.
yeah, I
The
don't
fact that they had
understand.
benefits after 5 minutes is
5
crazy.
minutes. All right. Maybe they're like, you can't get a decent ab workout in 5 minutes.
So what are we doing? Why are we doing 30 minutes if we can only have to do 5?
Well, that's our next question, man.
Yeah.
So, man, I was looking through all your bio stuff when I was sitting there at the NBA meetings, and it was a big table and everyone's sitting around talking. All I heard about people talking, peptides. And I saw you're looking at that. Is that something that you're using up there? I haven't really gone down in that world that much, but I was like, I had nothing to offer. Me and Jeremy both were like, what is this?
Yeah, no, I just kept hearing so much about it, and I was like, I'm just gonna do like a lit review here. I gotta figure this out, and so it's something I just hear so much. It's hard to ignore. So it's not something I've really dug too deep into as far as like, continuing on a daily basis thing, but I wanted to kind of see what the research said. I thought that was important to kind of get out there. We'll see what happens in the future, but
All right.
yeah, that's.
Well, if you find something, let me know. If it makes me younger, grows more hair or something, let me know. It makes me 6'11".
Put it this way. I don't know a lot of people that have used it, but I know some, and not athletes that I work with, but other people that are my age and whatever, and they swear by it. So I don't know.
Well, that's what got me. One of the guys next to me was just like, he took them, and it was just like he found the honey pot. So
that's what I keep hearing. It just blows my mind. So that's the next thing.
Oh, damn. We just got a bunch of people starting peptides now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jordan, man, it's awesome having you on. Congrats on getting this dissertation finished up. I guess the next step, maybe not, is getting getting this thing published. So, and it looks like you're going to be a busy man because the Pistons look like they're going to be going in the playoffs for years to come. So congrats on everything with the team as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for having me so much. It's been great chatting. And, like I said, I've listened to you guys for a long time. So being able to talk to you guys, and it's been fun. So, and then awesome. Yeah, Pistons, we got a good thing going on right now. It's been fun after a couple of years of not so much fun. So it was kind of a good year for us. So we'll hopefully can keep it going, and I look forward to it.
All right, man. Appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Johnny. See you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Before we go, a quick reminder that the information discussed on this show is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your treatment or training regimen. For show notes and additional resources, be sure to check out owensrecoveryscience.com. And don't forget to like the show and subscribe for more evidence-based insights. Until next time, earn your deflate.